Welcome to episode 6 of the Race Report podcast, everyone. I hope everyone is doing great and had a nice Easter break. F1 itself has been on a week-long break between the Australian Grand Prix and the Grand Prix at Imola this coming weekend, and that's a great time for us to sit down and review how things are going, isn't it? So how are the teams getting on? We'll start with Ferrari, because they are the ones in control right now. Charles Leclerc is screaming out ahead of everybody else right now, and it seems to be at this early stage that the championship is his to lose. Ferrari have definitely benefited from the lack of reliability issues the others seem to have had. Obviously Red Bull with their power unit all over the place. Mercedes have had a lot of cooling issues as well. But Ferrari, we've really not heard a lot about problems with their car. Sainz seems to suggest something at the last race in Australia. He said he had a problem with his steering wheel and he had to get that changed out, and there was still a problem with it, which he, attributed to his DNF that race. Even though they got severe porpoising, it doesn't seem to affect them that much, and they are definitely the team to beat. Their only down point will be Carlos Sainz right now, who is not keeping up with his teammate. In Bahrain, it just seemed like he was having a bit of bad luck. And then in Saudi, he just wasn't close enough. And then a DNF in Australia means that he's very, very far behind his teammate already, and we're only 3 races in. It'd be interesting to see if he can turn this around and pull off a race win, because honestly, he's a decent dude. Want him to get a race win whilst the Ferraris are up there, right? Behind them, we have the Red Bulls, who could have the fastest car on the grid. There's no doubt about it that it is definitely either the first or second fastest car, but it's the most unreliable on the grid. They've had 3 retirements out of a possible 6 already, and it's all down to their power unit. Of course, they did take over the operations of their power unit. It was a Honda power unit last season, and they've now taken over. It is the Red Bull power unit, as Honda have left the sport. It seems to be crumbling down around them right now. Max Verstappen has 2 DNFs out of 3 races. Sergio Perez has 1 DNF out of 3 races. It is paramount that they fix that issue. Otherwise, there will not be a title fight on our hands, despite Red Bull having the car to do so. Christian Horner has been kind of upbeat about this, though. He said, "I'd rather make a fast car reliable than a reliable car fast." Which makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? I mean, as soon as they improve the reliability, boom, they're championship contenders. But the team we actually have in second place in the championship is not the one we'd expect right now. It's actually Mercedes, who, for all their faults this season, are just driving the socks off of a, relatively poor car for them. They've made no real improvements so far this season, but they're second in the championship simply due to Red Bull retiring so much. I think a lot of the credit does have to go down to the drivers. Clearly that car isn't that fast, especially not as fast as they want it to be. They're saying it's actually the 4th or 5th fastest car out there. They believed that they were behind the McLarens and the Alpines out in Australia. But so it's credit to, Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, 2 fantastic drivers. They're putting it in these positions to pick up those points and indeed those podiums when the Red Bulls do fail. It is insane to me that George Russell is second in the championship as well. He's just doing a modest job by the feels of it, but it's consistent, and consistency wins championships. Obviously, he's not going to win this championship by the looks, but he's put himself in second with that consistency. So, fair play to him. McLaren were another one last race in Australia that had a good race. It seemed like a really good race, right? They qualified really well. Both of them finished really well. So it surprises me when I hear them so downbeat in the interviews. Like, they're really downbeat about their chances. I don't know where they expect to be or where they, want to be or anything like that. But when they're interviewed, they're like, yeah, it was just the track suit in our car. We're still terrible. We've not improved the car. So it's like, okay, you're not going to take this victory. All right, fine. They themselves suggested that they might have been faster than the Mercedes in Australia as well. However, because they've not made any changes to the car, it's still the same car that raced in Bahrain. They're like, well, we could have another race where we're at the back again. For me, I thought it was great to see them up near that front of the grid again. Both of them together as well, Ricciardo and Norris up there. Obviously, Ricciardo is home Grand Prix. That was quite interesting. And if you look at what they've done and where they've gone. Sure, they've said they've not improved the car, but it looks like it's improved, right? Bahrain was terrible. Saudi was a little bit better. Australia a little bit better. So it looks like they're on the upswing, but I guess that everything can change in F1, right? On in-race performance right now, it does look like the Alpines are actually the 4th place team and the team to beat, right? They're just quietly going about getting decent results, like Ocon's performing well, Alonso's performing well. They could have had a really spectacular result in Saudi, I thought, if they didn't fight each other for so long. I mean, it was a fantastic fight to watch, but yeah, you got to admit that hurt their chances. So it just feels like they're, going through the motions, getting the decent results, getting that consistency, and potentially they're the top of the midfield right now as a result. And between them and the McLarens, there seems to be like a little gap back. I'm not sure what to make of like the bottom half of the midfield pack right now. It's AlphaTauri, Haas, and Alfa Romeo, definitely. But I'm not sure where those guys fit in together. Obviously, Haas were very good in the first 2 races, scoring consistent points with Kevin Magnussen. But they had a really poor Australia, so it'll be interesting to see how they deal with that. Are they going to bounce back and get back into the points? Or are they going to kind of go, we've had our day in the sunshine and fold a little bit? Alfa Romeo are another interesting one. Obviously, they had a stellar first race, a 6th place and a 10th place for their 2 drivers. Brilliant considering where they've been over the last couple of years. But they've like steadily moved back a little bit. Maybe they're just finding their real position in the field. Bottas is still dragging points out of that car though. So, it's hard to know where they rank against Haas, for instance. And it's hard to know where they rank against AlphaTauri, because AlphaTauri, for sure have fallen back off of their previous season's form, right? Like Pierre Gasly, who was able to achieve race wins at times, is now fighting for like 9th and 10th place. So they'll be disappointed. They've also got the same problem as Red Bull, running that Red Bull engine. So they've got a little bit of reliability problems. And they're kind of anonymous on race days, I've noticed as well. We're used to seeing Pierre Gasly scrapping away for like 6th or 7th place, getting involved in some action. We've not seen that this year. I've been quite disappointed by that. So hopefully they can, move forward on the grid and everybody can kind of start fighting for that upper midfield part out of that group. At the back, though, we definitely have Aston Martin and Williams right now. And Williams did a brilliant job last time out. They got a surprise point with Alex Albon, a great strategy. I saw so many memes that are like they just forgot Albon was in the race. That was really funny, but it was a good strategy. I was very surprised by it, but I love that kind of surprise. Haas used to do this all the time in previous seasons, where they would have this wild strategy that, it wasn't on the paper. It was like no other teams think of it because it's kind of weird and out there. And Williams executed one of those strategies and got a point because of it. I love it. It's brilliant. Latifi needs to stop crashing though. Let's be honest about that. I was always kind of soft on Latifi. I was like, hey, he's going up against George Russell. George Russell, obviously an amazing talent. We can't really judge Latifi against Russell too harshly. He's up against Albon now. Latifi, man, come on, you need to show us something. At least stop crashing. There's a couple of teams in the field already that are like under pressure because there's now a budget cap. And if their drivers keep crashing, that's sapping money away from upgrades. Aston Martin are another team in that category. Obviously, this is like a little less their fault, I think, because Hülkenberg, reserve driver, no time in the car, probably going to make a few mistakes. Sebastian Vettel, coming off COVID, out for 2 races, he's probably going to make a few mistakes as well. So a little less their fault, I think, but that car is definitely very poor for them, right? Sebastian Vettel's actually refused to name it. I saw this story and I chuckled. I always forget he names his cars, right? Sebastian Vettel always names his cars after their characteristics, and it's all Bond girl names and whatnot. He's actually refused to name this car. He says it's too slow to deserve a name. If that's not a damning indictment, I don't know what is. I also thought Hülkenberg didn't really get the credit he deserved because, he was so far back due to the poor car that I don't think anybody realised, that he was doing a pretty decent job, a very solid job. I mean, he beat Stroll in one of their races. I think it was in the Saudi race. He beat Stroll and he outqualified him, I think, in the first race in Bahrain. So it's like, fair play. Like Hulkenberg, with no practice at all, is going up against Stroll and, doing a very, very solid job. But because he was so far down the grid, I don't know if anybody really noticed, which is a bit of a shame. Of course, with all of this, there is the caveat that the season is long and hopefully plenty of development will come and it'll shake things up a little bit. We're obviously still super early, so we've not seen too many developments. It's mostly been like necessary switches between the tracks. So we all saw like the aero change for the Jeddah track, for instance, and stuff like that. But we've not seen too many things, significant upgrades come in. One of the things that I saw said, I think it was by either Mercedes or McLaren, which I thought was such a good point and isn't widely shared, which I think should be, is that now that there's a budget cap, teams can no longer make small, like tiny incremental changes. Like I think it was Andreas Seidel at McLaren that was like, they could make hundreds of tiny changes along the floor, which might give them a tenth of a second here and there. But that is all, money spent on those tiny changes, which make a tiny effect. Whereas now, because of the budget cap, they have to save that money and then put it into a bigger upgrade, bigger bang for buck. And it was really interesting to hear them say that. And that's kind of why the pace of development has been a bit slower than what we're used to, because they're having to save the money into these bigger developments that will make bigger changes. So hopefully there will just be a race one time where, say, McLaren introduce an upgrade and it's huge and it makes a huge impact to their car, or maybe Mercedes make one big change which solves all their porpoising issues. That's the kind of thing that I'm looking forward to, and it makes so much more sense now why we're not seeing those smaller changes that we're very much used to. We're used to just being like, oh, there's a new scoop, or there's like a divot in the floor now. They're just not being able to do that because there's not enough money to. And that brings us nicely into our next race, really. We're now coming into Europe, starting with Imola at the weekend. A lot of people, myself included, expected plenty of upgrades to come in. Obviously, we're in Europe now. It's much easier to ship the parts. It's been a few races for the teams to get data, etc., etc. But we're starting to hear that teams aren't necessarily upgrading this race. Like Ferrari were the big ones. I expected, hey, we're coming to Italy. Ferrari are in the lead. They're going to bring a big upgrade, right? They're not. They've already said, do not expect any upgrades on our car for Imola. That's a real surprise for me. Like, their car is pretty much the exact same car they ran in the very first test. So they've really not changed it all that much. It was solid from the start. So they're clearly working on these bigger things that might take a little bit more time. And unfortunately, they can't get it in for Imola. We've really not heard too much about the other teams either. I think Mercedes said no, nothing coming soon. I think McLaren have also said nothing coming soon. Obviously, everybody wants to play their cards close to their chest, so they don't tip off other teams about what they're doing, what their changes are going to be, and when they're coming in. One thing is for sure, though, at Imola, we are going to have a massive party, right? Ferrari are leading the way as we enter Europe, as we enter Italy. Oh, that's going to be amazing. I know it's not Monza, the home, but it's still going to be big, right? We're still going to have some scenes. If we look at the news that's happened since the last race and coming into this race, there's really nothing. It's been very quiet. Everybody seems to be taking it, relatively easy right now. It's still very early in the season, so there's really no talk about driver moves or any kind of upgrades as we've touched on. There's been no controversies yet that we can kind of pull from. So it's been a very slow news week. But hey, I'm not complaining. A nice, calm Easter break, hey? Big thank you to everyone watching and everyone listening. If you have any questions that you'd like featured on the podcast or anything like that, do hit me up. If you're over on YouTube, pop it in the comments. If you're an audio listener, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or Instagram @RaceReportPod. And I will catch you for the race preview on Thursday.